Welcome to Getting to Know a Department. My name is Alia and I'm from Isaac, and with me is
Gerald Müller, hello. I'm the head of department for internal validation. That's a department in the risk division of Bank Austria. And yeah, if you want, I can tell you a little bit about what we do and what the task is about.
For me, internal validation, it does not ring a bell.
Yeah, the name doesn't tell a lot. So in the end, we, of course, as a bank, we manage risk, right? So we have different forms of risk. For example, credit risk, where we assess, the credit worthiness of our customer if they want a loan, or we have models that assess the so-called liquidity risk, where we see how the cash flows in our balance sheet. For loans, we get payments back, we hand out loans, and in the end, liquidity means that we always can pay our obligations. And for a bank, of course, it's a special topic because our whole business is about handing out money and taking in money, and this is the so-called liquidity risk. And there are some other risks, market risks, we call it interest rate risks, and the currency exchange risk. And with these models we have in the bank, we have built them and we assess them all the time whether they will work. If they're really still correct to estimate these risks, right? And for example, the credit risk model tells us basically for each customer we have in corporate and in retail, how much do we charge for the loan that we give you, right? And these models, of course, very important to us because if we price incorrectly, we either give a good customer at a low price or a bad customer at a high price, or the other way around. Yeah. So and my department is basically assessing these models regularly if they still work, doing basically different tests, statistical tests, qualitative tests.
So everybody who is in your department does more or less a similar thing.
Yes, so there are different models, as I said, right? Yeah. And liquidity is completely different than credit risk. On one hand side, you look at the customer, how much he can afford. Liquidity is more, what are the cash flows that are implied in a portfolio in a certain product. But in the end, it's always dealing with models, how well they work, looking at them in a quantitative manner. So, for example, doing statistical tests with them, or also qualitatively. How well do they comply with the regulations? So we have a lot of state regulations, ECB regulation, European Central Bank, that are telling us a lot about how these models should look like, what they should measure. And so this all we have to keep in mind, when we assess whether this model is still working and if it's compliant with all the law and the regulations.
Okay, so you adapt as well a lot. And
yes, so there are a lot of things that come in from external, right? For the regulator, gives us new regulations on certain things, but also, of course, we want to have a very good model telling us, which customer needs to get which price, because he has a higher risk or lower risk, right? So this is very important to us because it's basically the main thing. We don't sell cars, we give out loans, and if you give the wrong person loans at the wrong price, it's a huge problem for us.
I understand that makes sense. Okay, and then under internal validation, can you give us a bit of an idea how the teams are structured or the subdivisions in a way?
Sure. So in general, I split between corporate and retail because in all things that we are doing, I would say corporate is different. If you now just take the example of credit risk, right? If you look at the corporate company, some, I don't know, mid-sized company in Upper Austria doing something, has a completely different credit risk than you or me, right? If we now take out the mortgage and buy flat, or we need a consumer loan, right? So the model must look completely different, take different things into account, and also requires a different know-how. If you know how a retail market looks like, develops, and what are the important drivers you should understand, it's different than in the corporate world. So this is how I split it, also to centralize this know-how. And then there are some, I would say, special topics like process data ID validation that we also do, right? So we don't only look at the models, how they calculate, we also look at the surrounding, what is the data that goes into the model, because shit in, shit out. So if we get bad data, also maybe the model is correct, but if the data is wrong that goes in, the result will be incorrect. And the same is true if the IT is not capable of dealing with this. And the process then is looking at bank processes, how these results of the models are used, where, and if they're used adequately. So this is, I would say, a third part where we combine these, I would say, more qualitative topics.
Okay, makes sense. But then I'm gonna guess from what you're saying, part of the skill set that I need to have is data analytics.
Exactly.
But can you tell us a bit more of skills that I need to have in order to go into internal validation?
Yeah, so in general, if I look for colleagues, and we've hired quite a number of colleagues over the last years, it's usually a mean study, right? So quantitative study, it's perfect if somebody knows already using R, using Python, maybe has already used SAS. So this analytic modeling software is very important. Of course, not all of it, what we do has to do with this calculation software, right? There's also, I would say, this qualitative part, but it's a huge advantage, and I would say 80 or most of my people are quantitative analysts, right? And then they do some, I would say, qualitative process data part in addition, right? If they're interested in it. But I also have colleagues who do quantitative analysis 100%, yeah.
Makes sense. And if I am a young person who wants to enter in that field, is there like specific things that I should make sure that I learn or prepare myself with before applying for a job in internal validation, maybe?
Well, quantitative skills in terms of how to use the software. Yeah? I mean, you don't have to be super advanced. Yeah, but I think also in economics at the moment, if you take Wirtschaftsinformatik or if you take even international business administration, you have already used the software. Yeah? Of course, it will not be very elaborated, like if you did statistics or mathematics, you will be on a different level. But I have colleagues, within half a year or so, came really quickly into a sphere that can be comparable, if you're a quantitative guy, of course. So this is important. And then, I mean, the more you know about banking and, it helps you, of course, but I'm not expecting that somebody who comes from the university knows everything about the Basel Accords and this kind of stuff. But this you can learn, If you're interested in quantitative stuff, or if you know it already, I think this is the basis, If you know more about banking, about regulation, it's super, But usually on university you are not that deep into these topics.
And you learn it as you go. One last question, maybe just out of curiosity, can you walk us through a day of a normal working day, just how your day-to-day activities look like, what are main things you focus on? Just to put the whole things into more perspective somehow.
Sure. So we do different validations, right? So these assessments that I said of the models are validations. We do, I would say, more intense one, maybe for a new model that lasts a couple of months, where we, of course, also have show fixes on this project. This is a project then that runs maybe over a year or so, where we look into this new model in every different details. A couple of my colleagues are in it, and we have, of course, meetings then discussing where they stand, which tests they have just performed, what the problems are. So, and this is basically, I would say, I try to be involved in all the validations, especially the longer, the bigger ones. And there are also a lot of smaller ones, that we do in a couple of days where we assess something. So I think it's a combination of really working on a distinct validation, content-wise, and then having show fixes, having assessment, we also have a methodological show fix each Monday where we talk about, let's say, more methodological questions, not on a specific topic, but more, what is interesting to the others, so doing this know-how sharing. But in the end, we have a couple of show fix where we talk about, I would say, overarching, where everybody stands, what are the issues he said, whether it's relevant for the others. And then there are numerous, I would say, more or less content-driven project meetings, content meetings, reading through a report, talking about critical stuff, also talking to our holding function in Italy, where we get a lot of know-how from, based on the policies we have within the group. And this is always a big discussion point when we have methodological questions about this test or another test or about a certain model. So this is basically what we do all the time.
There's a lot of thinking, like critical analysis here, data analysis there, and sharing like kind of good case practices from each other. And I think it's very cool because it sounds like very fast-paced, but it's always something new and something interesting that you can work with. That is perfect.
I think so, yes.
Like that's the gist of that icon.
It's a good summary.
Then just to wrap it all together, is there something from your side you would like to say for anybody who's still curious or questioning about your area?
No, I think it's if you're into quantitative stuff, it's a very good thing to grow also, because there are many different models, many different things to consider. We don't want just this is the number and I don't care about left or right. So people should think holistically. What does it do in the bank? What's the effect in the bank? If this changes, what is the effect on pricing? What is the effect on the accounting? So, the more you try to understand the bank, the better for the validation. And the more, if you want to understand how a bank works, it's a very good job because you're very broadly understanding, how do we deal with credit risk? This is maybe one of the central questions a bank has to solve. No? If this is not working, the bank is, I would say, not on a very good track. Yeah. So this, I think, is what the post offers. You are basically paid for assessing how we manage our risk. No?
Sounds cool, actually. Sounds very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time and thank you for explaining this to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.